Let's start with you, Troy. You were a principal for a long time in Chicago. Talk about the challenges in being an educator, providing quality education for communities that are facing so many challenges.
Well, the challenge is the attack. And the challenge is a two-pronged attack. There's an attack on the schools themselves and on educators, and there's an attack on the children that attend them. You know, I've been a principal in the poorest communities, and I've been a principal in some of the wealthiest. I have taught children who were homeless, and I've taught children whose parents own multiple homes. And when I was a principal in a low-income community, for example, Johnson School, the kids at Johnson on day one of kindergarten would come to school years behind the kids at Blaine on the north side in Lakeview in a wealthy community where I was also a principal. Day one of kindergarten, and they're years behind. How's that a failing school? It's the first day of school. They've never been in a school and they're years behind. They're behind because they've been failed long before they ever reached the school. They've been failed by their city councilmen or aldermen, as we call them in Chicago. They've been failed by their state rep. They've been failed by their mayor. They've been failed by their congressman, their senator. They've been failed by their state representative. They've been failed by the business community that didn't create the jobs for their parents to have access to adequate income to provide them with access to things that would stimulate their cognitive development. They're failed by the fact that if you live in Lincoln Park, a wealthy community in Chicago, you have a 0% chance of being exposed to lead paint. But if you live in Austin, a black community, you have a 1 in 4 chance of being exposed to lead paint and then having those cognitive difficulties that come with that exposure. And so if you're in Austin, you show up to school. Getting back to your question, you show up to the school. You know, the schools in Austin have an entirely different population of kids to deal with. They have a population that's been neglected, that didn't get adequate nutrition, that's been exposed to lead paint because they have been failed by their municipal government, by their county government, by their state government, and by all the people that I've just listed. And so there's an attack on these children long before they've ever reached the school system. And so that's a big part of that challenge because you are then required to make up for a gap that you didn't create, right? And it's an impossible task because when the kids get there, you can teach them and they're going to learn. But remember, this is all about an achievement gap, right? And so if a kid in a poor community is here and a kid from a wealthier community is here, in Chicago, poor kids learn in school. But the gap's never gonna close because the wealthy kids keep learning too, right? You're not gonna close the gap until you deal with that gap where it starts. And that gap starts from birth to 5, where that gap is created. Am I making sense here? And so that attack on those kids is one of our biggest challenges, and the neglect of their communities is one of our biggest challenges because we then have to deal with the failure that is delivered, the failure to treat them adequately that's delivered to the schoolhouse door on day one of kindergarten, and then we take all the blame. You know, it's my belief that when a kid reaches your school on day one of kindergarten, they should be given a test. And when they take that test, somebody should be given a grade, but it's not the school. Their aldermen should be given a grade. Their city councilmen should be given a grade. Their state reps should be given a grade based on whether or not they did what was necessary to ensure those kids come to school ready to learn.
You know, since No Child Left Behind and before that, there's been this tremendous push for accountability for schools and educators and principals, but that question is never asked. How do we evaluate the people in power, the people that are controlling these policies? Diamante, we just heard a perspective from Chicago. Do you see parallels with Baltimore?
Oh yeah, I see a lot of parallels. I concur with everything Troy said.